Really excited to have you join us today for our webinar on Nothing About Us Without Us, lifting up youth voices, which we are facilitating through Mentor North Carolina. My name is Raimundo Garcia, and I will be the host for today's webinar. I serve as a local programs manager for my Brothers and Sisters Keeper, Orange County, which is the lead agency for Mentor North Carolina. And today we have some amazing guests who I will introduce in a little bit. But essentially today's webinar is going to focus on the importance of youth voice. And we're going to be covering some really important and timely questions related to supporting and enabling our youth leaders. And we'll cover some best practices and strategies organizations can use to leverage and center youth voices. And so just to keep in mind as we're going through today's webinar, all the attendees are going to remain muted, unless we're able to allow some folks to speak up, and also just depends on the size of the attendees. And then if you have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A box, and we will make sure to get to them as we're going through the presentation. And of course, utilize the chat box for any comments, any aha moments that you may have. If there's something that you would like to send resources about, then go ahead and do that. And then in terms of using the recording of the webinar, we will send that out a week after of today, and so that will be made available to you for sure. Awesome. And so now we have our special guests who are featured on today's webinar. I'll start off with Elise Frazier. She goes by she, her. She is the director for Youth Initiative and director at the City of Durham for Youth Initiative Analyst. And she has spent her career centering the voices, stories, and lived experiences of young people, and believes that young people are co-creators in the movement to improve our communities. She works to build the skill and experiences of young people to take on leadership roles, while also working with the adults to prepare them to share space with youth as decision makers. Elise is a storyteller and an avid hiker and a joy enthusiast. Next up, we have Nori McDuffie. He goes by he, him. He is a project assistant for the City of Durham Office of Youth. He believes in using his position in the office to make space for other young people and create an impactful change in his community. He conducts focus groups, manages social media accounts, and the Yo Durham text line. Outside of work, Nori's a photographer, an alumnus for the National Teens Council, and sits on the Durham POC caucus. Next, we have Jalen Seegers. He goes by he, him, and he's the youth project intern for the City of Durham Office on Youth. He has always had an interest for working with and helping young people throughout his community. He works in the office to meet young people where they are, to help and develop true connections with them through youth engagement. Jalen enjoys playing basketball, listening to various genres of music, and enjoys spending time with close friends and family. He will also be a rising sophomore at Central here in Durham. And then we have Michael Duvall. He uses he, him. He's the national project leader for Voices of Color through YMCA of the USA. He is a community lead for My Brother's Keeper, Charlotte. He is a 32-year veteran of the YMCA. He began his career at the Megaw YMCA in Evanston, Illinois, where he served for just over 15 years. He then joined the YMCA of Greater Charlotte in 1999. So this is an amazing lineup that we have here today. We are super excited to cover the topic of empowerment of youth voices. And our guests are going to make sure that we cover some really important topics. And so to start off, I want to make sure that I allow the panelists to introduce themselves, just in terms of the work that they do. So I'll start off with Elise, if you just want to share a little bit about the work that you do with the City of Durham Office on Youth.
Yeah, Ray, thank you for having me. So the work in office on youth is pretty much twofold, right? And it all encompasses youth engagement. So there is this youth engagement piece in our office where we work directly with young people. We believe in the office that young people are co-creators of our community, right? Not just the programming in our office, but our community as a whole, right? And so that looks like co-creators in policy development. That looks like co-creators in youth programming, right? And so we really work as an office to build our young people's leadership, right? So that they can be a part of decision-making tables. So that looks like working directly with young people to do training. What does advocacy look like? Who holds power in your community, right? So that young people can understand these things so that when they go to decision-making spaces, they can make informed decisions, right? And then on the flip side of this youth engagement, we work with adults. So we work with youth service providers, we work with city and county leadership, we work with nonprofits to ensure and make sure that adults are prepared for when young people walk into the space, they're prepared to share power, right? Power is not something that folks give up easily, right? We know this about the way the world works. And so we really emphasize with adults about not just sharing power, but what does it look like to prepare a space so that the ground, right, is fertile for when young people come into a space. And so that also looks like, what does it look like to set a budget to pay young people, right? Like you would pay any other staff that are doing important work that you value. What does it look like to change meeting times to accommodate young people in their schedules? So maybe it doesn't look like have an 8 a.m. meeting. Maybe it looks like having 5 p.m. meetings, which can sometimes be counterintuitive to the way we work, right? And so that's part of the youth engagement sphere, right? It's preparing young people to be decision makers and then also preparing adults to share power with young people. And then this other space we work in is how can we improve the youth services that the city and county offer to our young people so that they are more relevant to young people's needs, right? And so we can reduce the barriers that young people face. And we do all of this in youth adult partnership. That is the most important core component of our office and our values, right? Is that things work better when young people and adults work together hand in hand because we each have lived experiences and skills and knowledge that we bring to the table. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, that's how our office flows and the work that we do.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Nori, if you would like to go ahead and just share a little bit about the work that you do.
Yeah, thank you, Elise, for that wonderful introduction of what our office do. And so, like Elise said, we are really about like making sure that youth and adults are able to work together and that we're able to improve youth services and programs. And so when we really start to get into that work, we have to, of course, get youth input. And so that also looks like we have this youth listening project. And so we set out to really hear from young people about their experiences and perspectives just about how we can improve Durham's youth services and programs. And so we held public focus groups and then just these private focus groups. And we really listened to what young people had to say about just how we could do these things. And so we asked a list of questions pertaining from transportation to safety to diversity, really getting a better understanding of just what their youth, what their experiences are, and just how we can really improve these services. And then we, of course, will take this information and report it out and really come up with a list of recommendations, just how we can do this, and ensuring that like we are really capturing and really doing the things that needs to happen. And so it also looks like just giving youth better opportunities so that they can really be a part of these decision-making process and be co-creators for policies and programs and different things that, you know, really have not just an effect on adults, but effects on them too. Yeah.
Thank you, Nori. That was good. Jalen, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, so I thank Elise and Nori for kind of summing a lot of that stuff up. But what I can add, what I can truly say from my time being in the office, I've been able to, not just me being able to learn, but I know our office as a whole, we take the time to help develop those skills and push people out of their comfort zone. So I'll say this, for example, for the Youth Listening Project, we also had youth ambassadors that were a part of our office, and on that or in that process, as well as myself, Nori, Elise, and the rest of the office, they would participate and facilitate in these focus groups, and they would do note taking and greeting, and basically, really developing those skills. We've had trainings and just been able to fully connect with not just the young people that we work with, but the young people in the sessions and those caregivers and those perspectives that we were trying to capture throughout the whole listening project. So it's truly been able, also being able to meet people where they are and, just truly develop and show and create different opportunities while they're in the moment. And then after that, in any other endeavor that they, go on and go forth in.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jalen. And yeah, this just goes to show the great work that the Office on Youth with the City of Durham is doing. And so Michael Duvall, if you want to go ahead and share about the work that you're doing in Charlotte.
Yeah, so let me first shout out to Mentor North Carolina. Thank you for having me on, and what a pleasure to be with Elise, Nori, and Jalen. I hope I'm, as the old man, I hope I'm going to learn today as much dynamically as I have over my 58 years. So what I would say, and I lead the strategy work for to improve the outcomes for boys of color at the national level, and then I've been on the founding group here in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, North Carolina. And so we have been working for the last couple of years, and I would just say we're seeding a word, belonging, which I would love to just read the phrase, because I think this is so important to get grounded. So the way we have defined belonging, and I think Carmen, our younger co-creator, is on, is the shared experience of co-creating unity that grounds identity and transforms otherness into togetherness. So what we're saying essentially is you really need youth voices to co-create and to get to the unity and to get from the otherness to the togetherness, right? But it starts with identity. So I think Elise said that a little bit earlier. I would just say, I think I'm the oldest on the group here. As a 58-year-old man, I also have 2 boys and a beautiful wife. So I also know too that whatever I'm doing for others in community, hopefully I have done for my own family. And to be frank, hopefully somebody did it for me, right? So I know people did it for me, and this is so I don't lose connection or contact, that if I'm talking to Elise or Nori or Jalen or you, Ray, I'm essentially always connected to you, right? Through your own story, which hopefully elevates my own, who I am in that shared experience. So the applicability of it, and then as we're looking to do my Brother's Keeper here in Charlotte, North Carolina, we're also using artists and others to share voices of the young men that we're actually serving. And that is actually what goes up on our website. So what I would say to people is, I think being practical and trying to be intentional in every step that you do is that using voices. That's sort of how we're looking at it, is everything will be intentional. Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you, Michael. And so we can go ahead and get started with some of the questions that we have here prepared for the panelists. So the first one that I have, and of course, like, this doesn't have to go in a specific order, and anyone can chime in for sure. So the first one is, how does your organization work to support youth development?
Oh, so I guess I'll go. I was waiting on
You got it.
my younger counterparts. Yeah. So broadly, particularly as it relates to the YMCA, youth development is a core area for us. So obviously we're in the youth business. So I think elevating what we would call opportunity youth, I think, has been a primary focus, meaning where are those folks who have largely been disconnected, and what can we do to better connect them to our own platform and then to their own community. So when we say youth development, I think primarily we're talking birth generally to about 18, but I think we would extend that out to about 24. And organizationally, I think if you know anything about the Y, right, that's where the young comes from. So trying to make sure that we're elevating young voices, but also being aimed at youth development.
Is I think when you are really thinking about, well, when we are thinking about like how my organization is like supporting youth development, it's really about like creating spaces for young people that it allows them to feel safe and truly welcomes them. But it's also about kind of just creating these opportunities for young people and really doing the work so that they are able to feel prepared and really just giving them the tools and supporting them and understanding them. It's also just like about, you know, kind of, you know, giving them this preparation, but also like allowing them to do the work, but not micromanage them, and not like really giving them this self-autonomy so that they are able to like perform in a way that really allows them to do it, but kind of being there in the background so they are able to like get that support if they need it, but like I said, just really not micromanage them, and really we want to make sure that they are able to have experiences that they may have not been able to get if they didn't have certain resources that we may have provided, or we have kind of pushed them in a direction of. And so that's how I believe our organization supports youth development.
Yeah, I'll chime in. Thank you, Nori, and thank you, Michael, for your responses. Personally, for me, how I feel our organization supports young youth development. Sorry. I feel like we expose people, and it's been plenty of times, even myself, to different concepts and opportunities that we may not have known before being in this environment previously. But just taking the time to prepare young people for those leadership positions. That way, when they get into these positions, whether that's presenting or teaching or whatever it may be, that they can truly thrive and shine in that moment. And also, doing that back work as far as the preparing, so that comes back into the training and just truly just having those conversations to ultimately develop those skills and going into those different aspects.
Hey, Ray, I'm going to follow because these guys, I think, said, and hopefully Elise will chime in here, but I think they said something really important. I think oftentimes, and I'm hoping, I took from Nori and Jalen what they were saying is, the other is we're also in a period of resetting things, right? Because I would tell you the Y has thousands of programs. I'm not going to tell you those programs work. What I'm going to tell you is people are in them. What's really important is through a Nori and a Jalen and a Elise is that we're also resetting, reimagining, and refining programs. Because the most important thing for me is access, opportunity, expectations. So if you give people more access, if you give people more opportunity, they exceed their own expectations. So what we have to be clear is, I think we had programs, if I were being honest about the Y, and I was sort of processing this quickly, because if there are Y colleagues on, they may not like the fact that I would say this. But I think lots of times we get into programs to just allow people to get into activity, but the creating space is really important, and the reimagining, because really all of us ought to be about what's happening in terms of outcomes and impact. So the question is, if the program's not really changing a societal issue, that's why we need youth to reset how we might think about it. Because ultimately programs are put in place to elevate skills and practice and things so that the youth person who is involved in the experience where the space is created actually gets a chance to save themselves. Because that's sustainable and it's transformational. And so I would say when we're thinking about how we utilize youth and what youth development is, we also have to reframe what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful point, Michael. And to say, we often in our office look at youth development and look at young people not just as recipients of programming, right? Also creators of programming, right? That's really important. Young people are not a group or a body of people that you do stuff for or you do stuff to, right? It's about partnership, right? We do this in partnership with young people. And so that feels really important to us. And also a part of that partnership is our office living it, right? And not just preaching it to other departments or organizations, right? Like we do this work in our office. Young people work directly in our office and have like equal stakeholders like in the work that we do, right? And so you see us living out, right? We're embodying this work, just like it was really important for Jalen and Nori to be on this call with us, right? Jalen and Nori are both young adults in our office who are paid, right? We don't see their work as volunteer, right? Like we value it. And we value their voice, right? And so there are times in the office where we have a plan and things are going one way and our young people and our youth staff will check us like, actually, this won't work for this reasons, right? Or you think young people want this, but you are not really seeing, right? Or sometimes it's like, you thought you heard this thing, but this is what I'm actually saying, right? And so sometimes we even have to check ourselves in our meetings like, okay, just like you just did, Michael, like, I heard you say this thing. Is that what you're saying? Because sometimes I can like infer what I think is best, right, into the conversation. And that is a space where I step back and I'm like, okay, this is what I'm hearing. Is this what you're saying? And Jalen and Nori correct me, right? Like, that's nice, Elise, but this ain't what I'm saying. I'm actually saying these things, right? And so we live this work. And then the other part of it, right, just thinking about how we do the work and how we support youth development is, like you said, about making young people aware of the opportunities that exist, right? The city, and then pushing our organizations. The city has a number of commissions and boards and like panels for things. And oftentimes young people aren't added to those things, right? Like they aren't considered, space is not held for them. And so a lot of our office is about holding space, right? Reminding folks like, okay, if this thing is going to affect young people, shouldn't they have a decision in this? And if so, then shouldn't they have a seat at this table, right? Shouldn't they be on this board? Shouldn't they be on this commission? And connecting young people, and not just the young people we work with, but like reaching out to our network saying, hey, there's an opportunity for 3 youth leaders to sit on this board. Do you have any young people? And then when you sit young people on the boards, like Jalen and Nori mentioned, you prepare them to be in that space, right? You prepare them to succeed. Yeah, listen, I can sit on the soapbox and talk about this all day. So just tell me to be quiet at some point before I keep going.
No, that is good stuff. I appreciate that. And I feel like we're kind of converging around this notion of like youth adult partnership. So I know it's a framework that is used to really leverage and incorporate like youth into programming, but in a way that is actually like centering their voices. So I just want to kind of ground us in that framework. And so the definition that I found here from Advocates for Youth is a youth adult partnership is one in which adults work in full partnership with young people on issues facing youth and or on programs and policies affecting youth. So given that context, that definition, how do you incorporate the youth adult partnership framework into the work that you're doing? And I know that we kind of talked about that a little bit, but maybe providing specifics of how that shows up. And then just as a follow-up, what are some challenges and benefits in using such a framework?
I can kick us off here. Nori and Jalen mentioned, this is just one example of the work, but Nori and Jalen both mentioned our youth listening project that we kicked off. I guess it was a year ago now, right? Like COVID has my mind like every day is the same day. I'm definitely like Groundhog Day in it. But about a year ago, we kicked off this youth listening project, as Nori mentioned, to hear from young people how like to improve services around Durham, right? And one thing that was really important to us was if we were going to hear from young people, we needed young people on the team, right? That was super important. Our office up until that point had youth interns that we had maybe for a year. Again, this was like paid staff. They would stay maybe from 6 months to a year, and then they would circle out. But we knew that we needed permanent staff in our office. And so we hired 3 youth. We hired Jalen, Nori, and Beth Ann, who's not on this call. And not only did we hire young people, but we knew that the planning team for the youth listening project needed to be a youth and adult planning team, right? So we had community stakeholders, including the Durham Housing Authority, Durham LGBTQ Center, and also Movement of Youth. As our community partners, but then we also had 3 youth staff, our 3 youth staff on that youth adult team as community partners, right? Or as youth partners. And this team, this youth adult planning team, just made all of decisions, right? As far like even down to like, when are we having these sessions? What identities of young people are we going to center, right? Like who are we inviting? Down to like purchasing gift cards. Young people facilitated those sessions. As Jalen mentioned, they facilitated, they were note takers. They were the greeters in the space, holding space for other young people. And then we also had youth ambassadors, right? And then, again, these were paid young people who were working on our team, and who were doing the bulk of this work. And so that is like one example of what youth adult partnership looks like in our office. Yeah. I don't know if Jalen or Nori want.
I can say this, as far as, youth and adult partnership. Another thing that I've noticed and that I've, been a part of, like whether this is in the office, and it can be as simple as, just, I guess planning and like the planning for these meetings and different things. Sorry, I'm just trying to gather my thoughts. But the planning for these meetings, and it could be simply for me personally, I go to school, so I have to, I guess it's a partnership within our office, just in terms of, me having to schedule around different things that I may facing outside of work, but the office meets us where we are, and there's been times where, getting us ready for presentations and, that stuff that I may not have known. Elise or Laura, she's not on the call right now, but they've taken time personally for me to help and to meet me where I was. And at the same time, when I was ready, or me and Nori was ready to go into a space and, present to a group full of adults or whatever it might have been, I was prepared and I was ready and I was able to shine in that, in that experience. So, through my personal experience, youth and adult partnership has been great. And, for me as a young person, I've been able to learn, and in that be able to teach or be able to help others as well, through my own personal experiences.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Nori.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I really think when you have adults who are really into doing the work of centering youth and really valuing them, it creates a really great environment. For my experience, it has been really good. I think that I've had, a really great opportunity to work with adults who truly value the things that I have to say, who are really like there to hear my voice, not just use me as like some decoration or tokenize me. And like Elise said, when I like share my opinion, it's actually valued. It can change the way that things are being done. And because I've had this interaction, I've been put in a position where I've really been allowed to like flourish and grow, especially like my leadership skills and really being able to like step into different things, being more confident to do them. I think, like there can be challenges for sure, but like when you really like, I think it's about understanding that there's more than one way of doing something for adults. And as long as adults can understand that like being receptive to youth when they are working with them, then it really like does wonders. And also just having that like trust between me and the adults that I work with, I think is really special, because I know that like, I've been put in positions where it's like, hey, Nori, like you want to do this thing. But if you don't trust the young person that you're working with, or if you don't trust the adult that you're working with, and that whatever they are presenting to you, it can be hard for you to do, or even for the adult to offer that thing to you, because it's like, oh, I don't think this adult has given me the tools or will give me the tools or be understanding and supportive. But also, if you don't trust the young person that you're working with, you don't know if they are able to do this thing. And so having that trust and faith in each other really, really creates a wonderful bond in relationship. And I think that like having this sort of interaction and creating this type of environment really prepares youth for the future, and just in that moment. And so when they are moving throughout life and gone on to different opportunities, they know that they have had this sort of training and preparation, and they really can trust the things they have learned in the past, because they have been prepared by adults. And so I know I feel that way. And so I know that like so many other young people can feel that way as well. But it's really about like making sure that it's just not this thing where adults are kind of inviting youth into these spaces and then we're like, okay, y'all here, we don't really want to hear anything y'all have to say, because it's not what it's about. It's really about like things being, it definitely being adult initiated, that's fine, but also making sure that it's shared decision making, and that youth are really valued and they're uplifted, and their voices are really have a weight on things.
Can I just really quickly, first of all, I'm like this, right? And also I wanted to name one of the challenges, right? That I think, I'm sure Jalen and Nori and everybody on our team will attest to. There was a period of time where I think Jalen, Nori, and Beth Ann, none of their schedules aligned, right? And when when it was just me and Laura in the office, right, we worked 9 to 5 and it was fine. So we had meetings like on Wednesdays early or like at 10 o'clock. It was perfect. And then when we brought Jalen, Nori, and Beth Ann onto the team, there was one semester where none of their schedules aligned. So we had to change our meetings to like 5 o'clock from 3 to 5, and they often went like from 3 to 6. And it was just like, I want to go home this Friday, I got plans this weekend. Or it would be like a big event the next day, and we would have like we would like do reviews, right, of like whatever their presentation would be, and it would be me and Jalen like during the winter me, Jalen, and Nori during like the winter and fall in our office at like 8 o'clock. It's dark outside, and we are just preparing for this meeting, right? Like so that they can go and like I don't know who said it, Jalen or Nori, and shine, right? Like so they can be the most prepared, right? And so it's definitely I wouldn't say sacrifices, but I will say that sometimes the work looks unconventional, right? And it doesn't work in the mold of the typical 9 to 5, and that's fine, right? Because there, like Nori said, there is not just one way of doing the work.
Uh, these are such bright folks I'm with. I'm not sure I can add too much value, but here's what I would say. I think as you're practicing this youth partnership concept, the things I remember that are pretty practical are, you know, first of all, we kind of have to like ground everything in storytelling, because it's so important to hear the story of who you're talking to, because I think, Nori maybe spoke to this, I think the trust is so important, right? And that's really usually grounded in story, which is usually grounded in identity. We have stepped back a little bit in the YMCA broadly. I think we're also having to retrain folks that are in the youth development space, because I think we're also we can have a tendency to be very conventional about it. So we have to prepare people for even conversations around binary, non-binary, right? There's not one continuum of Black. There's not one continuum of Latinx. In fact, the X in Latinx is like the plus in LGBTQ. So we have to, some people don't like certain terminology because it makes them uncomfortable, right? So we have to also re-equip a team to get uncomfortable and learn in the learning space. So the practicality is, let me just make it really practical. I was sitting in a room with some folks, and one of the youth said he was queer. Now, queer in my own background is a word you don't say, right? I'm 58. And I through that experience, what I was learning is, and then he told me I could call him queer, and I said, I'm never gonna call you queer. But I think that we have created enough trust where he felt he could share the word and tell me what it meant, and then tell me I could use it. And so I think those are things where you have to learn to sit with a story and let someone really fully tell you, and then find ways to mechanize, right? The term I like to use is belonging is the currency of social capital. So until you get a transaction, right? I can tell you about belonging and I can tell you about social capital, but until I can connect, there's really not, the social capital doesn't get activated. So the reason I tell that story is we have to prepare people to hear all kinds of things. And through the hearing is where we can ground their own identity, right? And at the same time, ground our identity. Because my identity is evolving as a 58-year-old man. It's not static. And I have to be able, I have two sons, so at 24 and 27, and both my sons are biracial. Now they self-select as Black, but technically we're headed into a third of the population being multiracial. So we can't actually look at somebody and think there's something. We have to wait for them to tell us. So I think those are the nuanced practices that are coming, that we really have to find ways to get uncomfortable yet comfortable with stories, so that the healthy tension is how we learn together, but that we don't learn in I learn but you don't learn way.
Got it. Thank you everyone. I think that for me, what I was able to kind of extract from like this current segment is like this idea of like a sense of belonging, trust, like unconventional work, like storytelling. Like all these elements are coming up as we're discussing this notion of like youth adult partnership. And so just to kind of preface, so going into the next question, how can more adults show up as allies for like young people? And this doesn't have to take up like the structure of like a work environment. It could also just be, like in like family units, right? or like in high schools, it could really be like a variety of different spaces, institutions, but essentially like what can adults walk away with from this conversation of like ways to show up for young people as allies, as true allies, because sometimes that term is just thrown around, but how truly can an adult show up for a young person?
Yeah, no, I can start out as maybe the oldest adult. I would say listen until you understand. And then continue to be curious and empathetic. And I mean, really curious, and then present. I mean, to me, it's a lot like parenting. You know, again, I have 2 boys. I mean, I have to, sometimes I can't tell them, give a direction. I just have to listen and until they ask for direction. So as an adult, I would say as one adult, one way to be an ally or supportive is to listen until you understand, remain curious and empathetic, and don't go in solving the problem. I think allow the who you're talking to come up with solutions on their own, right? And you then affirm and guide direction. But telling is what I would say I would ask adults to practice not doing.
I think for me, I think adults can truly be allies is by like first educating themselves on ageism and adultism. And just, you know, really about like, and also educating themselves about like, you know, the struggles that youth face, especially Black and Brown youth and LGBTQ youth. And then having these conversations with other adults. And also just spreading this idea that like youth aren't just the future, but they're also the present. As members of the present, that like you have to realize that like adults aren't the only ones who are affected by policies and programmings, but like also young people are as well. But also, you know, really going out and creating these opportunities for young people, you know, really getting into that work. And so maybe that looks like, you know, creating some, you know, doing youth organizing or like art helping out with that, or, you know, creating events or organizations or, you know, some type of contest, something like that. And making sure that like when you are setting out to do these things that you're getting youth perspective and input and their guidance, and really making sure that you are reducing the barriers. I think it's really about like really centering yourself in this work and making sure that you are also just using your privilege as an adult to really create space and opportunities and really making sure that youth are heard, and making sure that you're kind of going out and going to spaces where they may not be really accepted in, and telling adults this is why it's necessary, this is why they need to be here, and kind of like advocating for them. I think that that's, you know, definitely a way for adults to be allies, and to also speak on what Michael said is really like, I think really when it comes to parenting, I think that like parents could make sure that they are being understanding, and that they're being there for their kids, and allowing their kids to be who they need to be, and really creating their own identities. I think that a lot of parents can kind of create kids to kind of like live vicariously through them, and kind of like spread these ideas. And, you know, I think it's just really about like, you know, letting them create their own identities and beliefs and just being whoever they need to be in that moment of time. Yeah.
I'll add something. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Nori. Personally, how I feel more adults can show up as allies, simply just taking the time to understand young people and what they're going through. I say this meaning genuinely connect with young people about their lives and their lived experiences, talking to, you know, young people about what they truly want, you know, having those conversations with them, and also you know, as adults, having those conversations with other adults who aren't ready for that change, like who are stuck in the one way, you know, truly as things start to grow and, you know, as things start to change, you know, being able to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. So I say that truly incorporating young people in the beginning of programming, strategizing, whatever it may be, that way that their voices are centered and that, you know, ultimately there could be something that you in your, you know, you as an adult may not understand or may not know, but bringing in and valuing that you've voiced, you learn something from that experience, you know, as far as incorporating them in the beginning and just, you know, having those conversations, you know, ultimately, you know, giving youth power doesn't mean that you're losing power, right? You know, that's important, you know, because, you know, it's a partnership like we were talking about in the last thing. It's not one has more than the other, you know, but truly being able to be open and understanding of those experiences, but at the same time, those adults that you may be around that may be, you know, stuck in one way or one-minded, having those difficult conversations with them as well to ultimately grow and to be insightful to them. That way they can approach their work or their encounters with young people differently, you know, as time progresses and ultimately being unafraid to make those adjustments, you know, moving forward.
Yeah, I just want to also add, there's also a need for a cultural shift, right? And I think that we're all kind of talking about it. And I can speak for myself, like growing up as a little Black girl, right? One thing that I often heard, not just my parents say, but the other adults, and mostly not my parents, right? But other adults, older adults, they would always say, like, when adults were talking and I would ask a question, they would also always look at me so surprised and be like, young people should be seen and not heard, right? Like, how many times have we heard that young people should be seen and not heard, as if young people don't have lived experiences, right? That might give them some expertise, right? And I'm not talking about being disrespectful, right? Because that's a totally different thing. But I think we need to shift the way that we view young people, right? And sometimes that could be as simple as like when you, and also if you're a service provider and you look at young people only as children, right? But not as like young people, right? Because that's what they are. They're human beings, right? With their own lived experiences. When you look at them that way, maybe because you have children, maybe because of like who is in your family, right? You often go into partnership and workspaces viewing them that way, right? And that brings a bias with it, right? Of like, I am the person with all the knowledge and I am pouring into you. And really, I think like Jalen said, it's a partnership. So we're pouring into each other, right? And so first it starts with not seeing young people as Nori said, like decoration, right? That should just be seen and not heard. It's like, no, when you walk up to a young person, you ask them like, how was your day? What do you think about this thing? Especially when decisions are being made that affect their lives, right? And it's also about like being willing to be wrong, right? Like Michael is bringing up this point about like how language changes, right? And so you might be an adult and have lived your life thinking that the word queer was something that you should not say. But young people today have like taken on that word, right? They've taken it on and they wear it proudly. And so it's a willingness to like shift the way we think, knowing that new things come up every day, right? And that young people can teach us these things, right? And so it's really about changing the way that we view young people so that we see them first as human beings, right? We see them first as human beings, and then second, right, as like, you know, we should all be taking care of and being mindful of like the care that we give young people and building them up, right? But not letting that thing of like, I have to take care of you, therefore I am responsible over you, It should be, no, like, I am responsible for your care, and therefore I am building you up and treating you right, as a human being. I think that's really important. And I think Nori said something earlier about, like, if you don't do that with young people, you will cripple them, right? In the sense that they won't be prepared to walk into these leadership roles when you leave them, because you never gave them that space. And so it feels really important to do that work right now. And so, yeah, I think that's how adults can show up as allies for young people, is like first seeing young people as human beings, right? Listening to them the same way that you would listen to another adult, giving them that same respect, right? And when you show young people that you respect them and value their opinions, that respect is given back to you, right? And then they're open and they share more.
Amazing. I just want to give a quick shout out to Nori and Jalen. I feel like y'all really killed it, and I'm walking away with like loads of gems of wisdom at this point. So just want to give a quick acknowledgement for that. I don't think we have any questions from the audience. So as I'm like wrapping this up, if you have any last questions that you want to get in, feel free to just type it in, and I'll hopefully get to that towards the end of the webinar. So we'll move on to the next section that talks about technical assistance that we offer from Mentor North Carolina. I want to make sure that everybody who's on this call is aware that we offer this service. And so, yeah, so Mentor North Carolina, we offer the state's lead technical assistance agency as a part of the National Mentoring Resource Center. And it's essentially, it's free consulting technical assistance to mentoring programs, and it's based on the elements of effective practice for mentoring. And essentially how it works is that you go to the link that's there, you apply for no cost technical assistance, and then once it goes through a few hoops, then at that point you will either be approved or not approved to receive technical assistance. But essentially what we offer in terms of TA support, it's, one example is development and revision of mentoring training materials. Another example is guidance and consultation on mentor recruitment plans and strategies. Another is analysis of mentor screening processes. And another one is in-depth evaluation planning. And so again, this is no cost. And so just feel free to go to the link and request TA support. And the next thing I also want to make sure everyone has on their radar is that for our next webinar, it's going to be entitled Elected Officials for Mentoring. And we're going to have within our presence, Adrienne Alicia, who's the Director of Government Relations for Mentor National. We'll also be accompanied by Representative Greg Meyer from the North Carolina House District 50. And then lastly, Commissioner Renee Price from the Orange County Board of County Commissioners. And she's also the co-chair for MVSK Orange County's Board of Advisors. So the link is there as well, and the time and date. So I will also send out this recording and slideshow to everybody who's in attendance a week from now. So just be on the lookout from that. And it looks like we don't have any questions from the audience. So I'm not sure if one of our panelists had any last remarks, or if we're all good to go.
Can I say one thing? I wanted to just remind folks and bring it back to the top of mind. And I always like to remind adults this, but young people have been the center of every social movement in this country and worldwide. When you think about who are the catalysts for change, right, and social change and bringing about like real justice, it's always at the forefront. The Honorable John Lewis just passed, and when we think about how old he was when he was marching, right, and organizing marches, right, and I just want us to remind us of that, right? We often think as adults that it's our responsibility to do the work and to change, and I think that it is. It definitely is. From the place of power that we currently have. And I also think it's our responsibility to see the power of the young people that we work with, right? And lift them up.
Well
so
said.
I just wanted to leave us with that.
Stick a pin in it, Ray. That's the last one.
Yep, that was beautiful. Thank you, Elise, for that. And thank you to all the panelists for joining us today. I'm sure that everyone has walked away with, just loads of wisdom. And again, thank you so much. And hopefully everybody has a great weekend.
Thank you, brothers. Good sister. Good to be with you.
Bye, y'all. Thank you.
All right.
Bye,
See y'all.
everyone.
See you.